friends, in today's video, I'm gonna be recapping everything that happened at Bryan Johnson's Don't Die Summit. And if you wanna go or you can't go because you don't have the money or time, don't worry, this video is gonna be your Spark Notes. And I'm also gonna be sharing this from my perspective, a nutritionist and longevity biohacker who's currently aging slower than a teenager. So to start off the day, we had a lot of different speakers, particularly Bryan Johnson's personal physician that monitors his entire longevity protocol. He was a very knowledgeable guy, and basically they just started initially talking about just some fundamentals. For example, sleep, nutrition, and fitness. And these are the three basic fundamentals of health, and typically they get so overlooked in our society because of the fact that people are so focused on one thing versus the other, or they're just trying to get like the newest supplement or biohacking gear or device and not focusing on the fundamentals. And so they really honed in, starting off with sleep. Sleep is the number one thing you can do for your longevity and slowing down your aging and to improve your health. Bryan said that not having enough sleep is basically like having a small car accident because your brain literally cannot take out the trash and remove damaged proteins and toxins that have accumulated during the day. He said that your first bout of REM sleep should be within the first 90 minutes after you fall asleep, because if it's not, it actually significantly increases your risk of Alzheimer's and dementia. So always look out on your sleep tracker and make sure that your first bout of REM sleep is within 90 minutes of sleeping, or if not, he says we've got some things to fix. And he shared his experience as an entrepreneur with 3 small babies at the time when he started Braintree Venmo, and he said that it was not worth the lack of sleep. That lack of sleep leads to depression, overeating the next day, and significantly reduced willpower and messed up hunger hormones. He said that he would have been so much of a better entrepreneur had he built his business on better sleep. He said he had rather it have taken maybe a little bit longer, but him not sacrificing the amount of health that he did, and also constantly feeling depressed and not being able to be the dad and husband that he wanted to be. He also, very similarly to myself, fired nighttime Bryan because he would get home after a long day of work and just want to snack and eat junk food because of all of the stress and craziness of the day. And what he decided to do is create like multiple personas. So there was nighttime Bryan, there's sleep Bryan, there's ambitious Bryan. And he'd say that in order to kind of get your thoughts under control every single night and get into a wind down routine, which is so essential for sleep. So there's ambitious you, that even if you have all of these incredible ideas that come into your mind right before you're about to go to sleep, instead of acting on them, he says, "Thank you, ambitious Bryan. We'll pick that up tomorrow morning and work on that tomorrow because we have all day to do that tomorrow. But right now, Sleep Bryan is taking over." And he almost imagines Sleep Bryan kind of like with a sword and a shield to take on the task of sleeping and not let all of these intrusive thoughts come his way. He also has Anxiety Bryan, which thinks all of these anxious thoughts and thinks about his day and how it could have gone better and what he did wrong, and oh my goodness, so much anxiety coming to his mind right before bed. And so also Sleep Time Bryan takes over and says, "Thank you for your thoughts, anxious Bryan. We'll work on it tomorrow." Personally, I've been using this over the last 2 days since the event, and it actually is really a game changer. I personally have anxious Anita show up all the time because as a business owner, I have a lot of stresses and responsibilities that I have to deal with. And she comes up every night before bed and she's like, "Oh, Anita, did you finish XYZ? Did you do this? Why aren't you working on this right now? We don't have time to be sleeping." And that personally is my biggest crux as a biohacker, and it's one of the biggest things stopping me from reaching the pace of aging score that I really want. Currently, my pace of aging is slower than a teenager, but it could be even better because right now Bryan Johnson is aging 1 year every 2 years, which is super awesome. His pace score is about 0.5. My pace score ages me about every year and a half. So instead of every 2 years like Bryan Johnson, I'm still a few months behind. So even as a longevity biohacker myself, I still learned a lot at this event. And basically Bryan was saying that instead of focusing on, oh my goodness, I have to get this new longevity supplement, I have to get this new red light sauna therapy device, I'm missing all of these things because of our consumerism society constantly making us feel like we need the next thing, the next new gadget or device that's gonna help us age slower or improve our health. But the reality is that he says that 99% of people don't have the basics mastered first. And this made me look inward into my own life because as a business owner, I do push off sleep often in order to finish my daily tasks. And this was something that he said, but I'll go and look for what's the newest supplement or what's the new NAD that I have to inject into my arm. And sometimes I feel so behind in the longevity space and the health space. And this just really opened my eyes to the fact that I need to be in bed at the same time every single night. And what Bryan says is to make it the most important appointment of the day. He also talked about VO2 max when it comes to exercising being one of the #1 biomarkers for longevity. So VO2 max is basically how efficient your body is at using oxygen when your heart is pumping and your lungs are breathing in air. And folks with a lower VO2 max have a higher risk of dying sooner. He encouraged everybody to do a VO2 max test, but he understands that this can be expensive for the average person. So your girl looked it up and it was like over $500 just to do a VO2 max test. I think I'm gonna hold off on that right now. But he said in order to increase our VO2 max capacity, we need to be pushing our heart rate a couple of times per week. And this is something that I had to look inward with as well because I exercise multiple times per week. I do weight training, I love to walk, and I do steady state cardio. But he was saying that it takes more than that. You actually need to be pushing your heart rate to the point where it's difficult to have a conversation with somebody. This heart rate zone, he said, increases your VO2 max. And this is a very important biomarker for longevity, and he said that we should all be working on it. So he introduced the Norwegian 4x4 protocol, which I've heard of before, but basically this is where you do 4 minutes of intense exercise where you couldn't hold a conversation with somebody, and then 4 minutes of rest. And then 4 minutes of intense exercise, 4 minutes of rest, and then repeat 2 more times. And this will eventually get your heart to start becoming more efficient at using oxygen. Then he talked about the basics of nutrition, and he said never let your mind decide. The human mind is pretty bad at choosing the proper nutrition for our body, and instead he lets his organs decide. So he lets his liver and his kidneys and his heart decide what he wants to eat instead of his mind, which is pretty cool because 99% of the time, our kidneys and organs, at least I can imagine, are always gonna choose the healthy food over the unhealthy option. At the event, there was a longevity playground, which was pretty cool because they had a lot of different vendors there. They even had a hyperbaric oxygen chamber, which is great for introducing your cells to a flood of oxygen and helping speed up recovery, which I thought was pretty dang awesome. Con though, they didn't really wash the mask after each use. So I hope they had some type of a sanitation method there because your girl went to the bathroom to wash her face off after I used that VO2 max machine, but I don't know about anybody else, but just in case. At this longevity playground, they had a lot of really cool vendors. For example, one vendor even showed me the biological age of my face. They tested the moisture levels in both my cheeks and my forehead, and they told me where I had sun damage, wrinkling, etc., and things that I could work on to actually improve my skin age. There was also 2 different types of biological age tests. So it actually tests the age of your cells, not the age that you are on the calendar. One of the tests was a test from True Diagnostic. I'm personally a partner of this brand, absolutely love this brand. They take a quick blood draw and basically look under a microscope to see how old your DNA really is, and they'll tell you some areas you can improve and the organ age of all of your organ systems, which is pretty dang cool. Also, if you're interested in that, I have the link to it in my description down below. And he kind of rebranded it to say Blueprint on it, which is really neat. And he also had a microplastics test too, because microplastics are everywhere and they're getting into our brain and our organs, so no good. And speaking of microplastics, one thing I really liked was that the lunch that he provided, albeit a little bit bland, was very, very healthy. and used minimal microplastics. The lunch they provided was actually a nutritious, balanced meal, and the utensils were made out of wood instead of plastic, which was super, super neat. And typically at these types of events, as a healthy person, it's kind of hard to find something that's nutritious to eat, and it was just like a breath of fresh air because Bryan provided us with some really delicious, healthy meals. How do you like the biohackers lunch? And then the second biological age test we did, which technically wasn't like actually looking at anything under a microscope per se, it was a physical age test. So we did a couple of push-ups, stood on one leg, tested reaction time, tested how far you can stretch your arms, things like that to actually see where your body is at physically. And thank my lucky stars, I actually was in the teenager range despite me being in my 20s, so I'm pretty happy with my results that I got. But he says that you can test all of these things on your own through the Don't Die app. And speaking of the app, he also started trying to create communities while we were all there. So he said that right up on the app, some folks could volunteer to become leaders and host sessions and community events in the area, including walking groups, exercise groups, and even book reading. So everybody can learn about health and longevity together, which I thought was pretty cool. And also, there was a little bit of a culty vibe about it, but regardless, it's still really neat to try to get other people in the community involved in good health, because Bryan says that we live in a die society. Essentially, our society, all the way from fast food restaurants being on every corner, in addition to our smartphones constantly trying to grab our attention and make our necks face downward all day, staying up late being cool and drinking and smoking alcohol being the social norm. He says that our society is really set up in a poor way when it comes to our health. And as a health coach with dozens and dozens of clients and a nutritionist, I tell all of my clients the exact same thing because truthfully, we need to learn how to navigate our society if you want to live longer and actually be healthy and not be another American statistic. At the very end of the event, which was one of my favorite parts, we actually got to dance and rave with Bryan himself. He really likes dance rave music, which to be honest is probably my favorite genre. That's what I listen to when I'm exercising. It really gets me pumped up for the workout. Woo! And that was a super enjoyable part. It was really funny because he had us actually put in earplugs while we were raving because he said any volume over 90 decibels actually ages your ears and hurts your hearing. So he told us to actually wear these earplugs while we were dancing and raving. So it was a little bit goofy, but just super cool at the same time. And it was really awesome seeing Bryan in person because I personally have been a fan of his for a long while, and it was really cool to see one of my role models. And I have to say, overall, the event was great. I would give it a 10 out of 10, great star rating. I haven't seen any other events like this before in my life. And as somebody who's been trying to spread this message for years about good health and what it actually takes to be healthy, it's really cool that Bryan is making it very accessible for everybody and making it very interesting for everybody to participate. Now, cons of the event, I say it was pretty dang difficult to get a VIP ticket. I was so excited to get a VIP ticket and be able to eat lunch with Bryan. My boyfriend was gonna get this for me as a Christmas and birthday gift, two mixed in one. And sadly, we did not get the tickets because they were sold out in every single location of the Don't Die Summit, all over the place, months in advance. So if you want a VIP ticket, I urge you to get one as soon as possible because they are very difficult to get. And I think it's because the price wasn't that much more expensive than just general admission. At the beginning of the day, there was a lot of people, and then towards the end of the day, there was just a lot less people. I don't know what happened, but I think it's just typical of events that more than half of the people will go home by the end of the day. They got the value they wanted from the event and just decide to go home later on. That's my best guess. And my only other thing I'd say is that Bryan was trying to build a community there, which this is not his fault. I imagine it's extremely difficult to get people to become more friendly and to get people to open up and feel like a part of a community at huge events like this. There had to be several hundred people there. It would have been really cool to just have like some moments where we got to meet the people next to us and just learn about them and what their goals were when it came to longevity, and maybe to see if we can connect with other people who are like-minded in the area. But I totally get it. I know that's what Bryan is doing with the app, so he's doing that anyways, but it would have been cool to do it at the event because it was really neat, as there was a lot of folks that went home at the very end of the event as we were raving and dancing. It felt a lot more intimate than at the start of the day. And no matter what level you're at, for example, me, I've been a long time longevity biohacker. I'm a nutritionist and a wellness coach for dozens of people, and I still went and I still learned something. I think anybody can learn and really enjoy this experience. There's not a lot of events out there like it. And just to kind of recap, biggest thing that he honed in on was don't forget about the basics. He really honed in on the importance of sleep, and I personally will be taking that with me and going to bed at the same time every single day, creating a wind down routine like he says. And this is another one I tell my clients is always only use your bed for sleeping if you can, because it kind of like trains your brain to just associate bed with sleep. As soon as I hit the bed, I fall asleep and boom, that's it. And yeah, anyways, hope this video helped and wishing you a beautiful, long, and happy life. Happy biohacking.